Well, here we are as we focus on the big stories for today. We start with a one-on-one discourse with a stalwart of the New Patriotic Party. He is a key player in this administration. He is former Member of Parliament for Adenta constituency. He served in the 7th Parliament of the Republic. Today, he is Director of Communications with the MPP or of the MPP. And we're going to discourse on matters of national, concern, but matters also of the party, the NPP and administration, and how things are shaping up. Buaben Asamoa is our guest this morning. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you, bro.
And I was just reminding you that the last time we seemed to have had an interaction was on the dawn of the 8th Parliament, in the ring where we had our discussions and all of that. And I remember some of the banter, the discourse we had.
I like it when you say in the ring.
In the ring.
Since then they
no, not the boxing ring, but it appears since then they have
in the ring.
How do you feel about that, though? Lest I forget, you used to be in that house, and now it's devolved into an issue of fisticuffs and all of that. How does that make you feel?
Two aspects, both arising directly from the confluence of numbers. Obviously, Ghanaians voted, and this is the parliament Ghanaians voted for. Now, the two things that are coming out is that, one, in spite of the closeness of the numbers, in spite of the appearance of impasse, and sometimes the fisticuffs and the banter, we still have a parliament and a stable democratic system.
Okay.
That is extremely important. 30 years of the Fourth Republic must be nurtured and continued at all costs, because that is the way forward. The very fact that Ghanaians are sophisticated enough to vote a hung parliament in and then observe how that parliament conducts itself, and it hasn't degenerated into anything but...
You say it hasn't degenerated? We've never seen scenes
so I'm going to the second level.
Before.
I'm going to the second point, that it hasn't degenerated beyond what we are seeing in parliament. Because, let's face it, regrettable as it is, and it is regrettable, there are other jurisdictions where worse happens. There are places where guns have been shot in the chamber, fisticuffs and all that. But the thing is a question of stability and progress beyond that. What I hope will not happen is that we descend into an impasse where we believe that the only way forward is through fisticuffs. That is a disaster. That means Parliament will be gridlocked, and then there's nothing we can do there. I think at some point they must give way to genuine dialogue, because that's what Parliament is for. The majority proposes, minority opposes to the utmost, and once they oppose and put their views on record, the majority's view must prevail in legislation. Once it prevails, the ultimate test is the people's vote. If the policies are poor, the people will vote us out. If the policies are good and sustainable, the people will keep us there, irrespective of the difficulty at the beginning when you are implementing.
Do you feel the opposition has been intransigent? And we'll get to talk about the E-LEVY extensively, so I'm not trying to jump the gun. But do you feel in all of this, especially looking at the numbers and the sort of positioning of the opposition, their utterances, do you feel they are being intransigent?
Frankly, I believe so. I believe they are misusing the numbers, frankly.
They are misusing the numbers?
I think so. And it's come up. Well, the positions they are taking. Like you said, we'll come to E-LEVY at length. But before Parliament could debate E-LEVY, they had already made up their minds. You understand that we will refuse this, and it seems to be in collaboration with the external party, the party proper. So the question of the relationship between the party outside Parliament and the needs and ends of Parliament seem to be clashing. Yes, because the party is totally focused on securing power. Okay? And the parliamentary caucus is involved in the national process of delivering legislation for growth. So somehow the parliamentary caucus have a more responsible job to do than the external party, which is simply focused on securing power. But now it appears the parliamentary caucus is being driven by the external need. The parties need to secure power. And the most obvious avenue is to use the numbers to block legislation. And in the belief that if you keep blocking legislation, then the government will become unpopular and fall.
But isn't that something you would have done in their position? It's a novelty to have the sort of numbers that we have in this Fourth Republic. Some would say even, what are the chances of getting an even Stevens? But that's exactly where we find ourselves. Only with the Member of Parliament for Fomena making the difference because he has opted to join your caucus and he was a member before he went independent. But in their shoes, you would be doing exactly the same, if not worse. I'm putting that to you. Wouldn't that be the case?
Not necessarily, but even if we were, that's why I'm saying that I would be happy to see that at some point they go towards consensus. But what would be bad is a complete gridlock. So yes, it's a process. And if we were there, giving these numbers, and we felt sincerely that there was something we needed to do, we would do it, but we would respect the numbers. We must respect the single majority that's Fomena, because the majority must be able to vote and have legal backing for their proposals. You know, this nearly happened before.
Which is what? The numbers we have?
The numbers.
Right.
In the transition from President Kufuor's government to President Mills's government, then candidate Akufo-Addo beat President Mills in the first round by over 100,000 votes. But he didn't make 50+1.
Right.
On the other side, Parliament, we had already dropped below 100. We had 99 seats and the NDC had hit over 130 seats. So if then candidate Akufo-Addo had gone through on the first ballot, he would have had to contend with a large NDC majority in Parliament.
Right. I recall.
You recall that.
And even the assumptions that were made on that, and for which reason some said they twisted or turned their vote because they felt that, I mean, if you can't govern because with this kind of parliament, you will not be able to make it.
That argument was first made by President Kufuor when he was coming in earlier in 1999, 2000.
Right.
Remember the first round, they all came in under 50% substantially, and then we had to go for a second round.
They mentioned that, look. I mean,
and then he said that
we have the numbers.
We have the numbers.
They can't govern, so just give it to us.
Just give it to us. So it turned very, very substantially in his favor. That is when all the minor parties will then come in and put their weight behind you. And all undecided voters accepted that argument and put their weight behind. So President Mills benefited from that.
Right.
And now we are in a situation where on the first ballot, it didn't have to go for a second round. We have a hung parliament.
Right.
So we need to sincerely work this. We need to do it with a nationalist sense that we are growing. So nobody should exploit the numbers with a view to undermining the system that makes the numbers possible. You know what I'm saying? Like free speech. You can't use free speech to undermine the instrument that gives you free speech.
Right.
And therefore, I am hoping that parliamentary practice, as we have it, growing, and we are heading towards a 9th parliament, also at this time of novelty, gives us constructive procedures that can feed into the 9th parliament. So that perhaps next time, when we have a majority in parliament different from the executive, we will have the ways forward in terms of dealing with it from the 8th parliament.
Talking about the ways forward, do you feel our parliament as it stands now with the standing orders and everything is not exactly framed in a proper way to be able to handle what we're having now in terms of this hung parliament, which some people refuse is a hung parliament? But you can see clearly that there are a lot of questions about the numbers, about the quorum, about voting, that have turned out to be very problematic for this parliament and will be problematic till we do something about that. What do you think?
It is a hung parliament. Now, those matters you're raising, quorum voting and all those issues, because of the majority, large majorities of before, we never looked at critically, but they are germane. So recently, I took a very close look at the standing orders, which incidentally are far advanced in terms of changes. But the current one, I took a look at it and I was surprised that what I took for granted in the 7th Parliament about the speaker's movements off the podium and otherwise is actually provided for in the standing orders. So yes, we have a rule we can go by. The question that has been outstanding in Parliament, if I may say so, is whether or not the second deputy speaker, first deputy speaker, presiding can vote.
Right.
If
that is still a matter we're waiting for clarity.
I haven't read the standing orders. I'm totally convinced that they can vote.
Why?
Why is that? Because the first deputy speaker and the second deputy speaker are MPs.
But once they act in that capacity, I mean, in the past, have we had situations where they voted?
I'm getting there. The speaker under Order 13.1 can get up at any time, provided there's another available speaker to sit in. Which
is the first deputy or the second deputy?
Yes.
Right.
So when the speaker gets up, at any stage of the proceedings, he doesn't have to give instructions about the reason why he's getting up under Order 13.1.
Right.
He just walks away and the other one replaces, irrespective of the stage of proceedings.
Right.
So the speaker doesn't have a vote. So he gets up, he goes away. If the first deputy speaker is in the chair, that the speaker has the capacity to get up and walk away means that the first deputy also has capacity to invite the second deputy to preside and step off the podium, take off his robe, and go and vote as an MP.
But that has never, historically, there's no antecedent.
Exactly. That is why I'm saying that we don't have antecedents for the 8th Parliament, but we have standing orders that can be interpreted as such. And so it's a new situation. We must move beyond the fisticuffs and begin to deal with standing orders.
So you subscribe to those members of your party who say that the first and second deputies, when they sit in place of the speaker, are not necessarily the speaker. They are merely acting.
At the time they are sitting there, they are the speaker. But I'm saying,
but if and that's the logic of it. If they are the speaker, then
when
they must
are
act
sitting
as the speaker acts.
When they are sitting,
take a turn off to come and vote because of course he's not.
The speaker is not an MP.
A member of parliament.
Exactly.
Yes. But I mean, he doesn't. Apart from leaving the chamber for some reason, which he doesn't even have to specify as he's put out, he doesn't partake in the process. So it is assumed that the others will also not partake in it.
No, you can't make that assumption because they are MPs. They have duties. They've been sent there with rights, imbued rights from their constituents. Their constituents elected them to come and represent them. And part of their representation is voting.
Right.
You cannot deny them the vote. They cannot vote, they cannot participate as long as they are sitting in the chair. That's my view. 13.1. As long as they are sitting in the chair, they have no rights of debate and voting. But when they get up out of that chair, and descend into the chamber. They are already in the chamber, but they're on a podium. When they descend into the well of the chamber, they are MPs and they have a right to vote. So if the first deputy speaker is presiding and the second deputy speaker is in the well, second deputy speaker can vote and take over the speakership for the first deputy speaker to come and exercise his rights as an MP. If
your caucus was so certain about this, how come you haven't used the standing orders, the law, so to speak, to have your way? Because on the floor of Parliament, you've been fiercely resisted by the minority, and it's one of the instances that degenerated into fighting on the floor of Parliament.
I believe that Friday, before the rise, this is the matter that was in issue when they were trying to start.
Right.
Yes, and it's unfortunate that the NDC couldn't accede to that argument and get it over and done with. Because I am convinced beyond all doubt that the rights of the deputy speakers as members of Parliament are not extinguished.
Would you have felt the same
by them
way
sitting in the chair?
Would you have felt the same way if you were on the other side? I mean, aren't you convinced merely because this inures to the benefit of the party you represent?
I have a right to be convinced. We are doing politics. We need capacity, opportunity, and ability to pass our legislation. The government is off the party.
Right.
And so once the party is in charge, we have the situation. We must deal with it in a way that furthers the interest of the government in terms of its program. Right. This program is backed by legislation, so it must pass its legislation. If we don't find a path through Parliament in the current situation, it means the government will be hamstrung. It means the government cannot proceed with its legislative agenda or executive agenda because it's all backed by legislation. The executive agenda is backed by legislation. So it's not a question of sitting back because they have the numbers, allow them to. It's a question of employing all the opportunities at our command, including compromise, negotiations, persuasion, and the strict application of the rules. All of that comes into play. So yes, if we were in that position, we would go for it till we were blocked by the law. And I'm saying that as at now, the NDC is blocked by the law because of our 138, though 2 are deputy speakers, they exercise a vote when they are not sitting on the podium.
Right.
And therefore, the NDC should accept that we need to pass our legislation. We have sufficient numbers to do so, and they have made their point. The whole world, the whole country has heard their point, and that their duty ends at that point where everybody has heard them. The rest depends on the electorate, who will determine whether or not our legislation served their interest enough to continue us in power. That is the bottom line. Okay.
We'll stay with Parliament, where there's been a lot of discourse and pushback and all of that. But let's talk about the E-Levy. What is your initial take on this entire bit about an E-Levy, electronic transactions being taxed, and not just the service charge being taxed or being levied? This is an additional levy. And we don't really see that. Even if you look at the example across the sub-region, you have the service tax being levied by different governments, from Cameroon to Kenya to other parts of the African continent. In this instance, we want to impose a further levy on the people, apart from the 1%, now 0.75%, and all of that. And people have raised the question about our taxes and what they are even being used for in the first place. And we've also had the infamous bit about a cake at the majority leaders.
You couldn't avoid that, could you? That was a dig, eh?
No, not a dig, but it has been in the media space. There's nothing we can do about that.
I think it was unfortunate.
But this entire E-Levy, be frank with me, if this had been an NDC government and they had said E-Levy, how would you have reacted? Would you have embraced it?
I think E-Levy is extremely important in the context of where we are as a local economy, as an African economy, as an international economy, post-COVID. COVID recovery gives us opportunity to restructure ourselves and make ourselves more competitive in the coming economy. The economy will never revert to normal. We have to do new things. Western economies are coming under pressure. They are moving from negative interest rates to high inflationary interest rates. Inflation has hit 7%. It was in America a 40-year high record.
Yes, okay. But let's put it into context, because in the United States that 7% high has nothing to do with COVID. You agree with me? It has to do with I followed that story extensively. It has to do with food prices. It has to do with accommodation prices. It has to do with electricity prices. Exactly. And they are clear that, the impact of COVID is not fed into this. It has nothing to do with COVID.
That COVID had nothing to do with food prices rising worldwide.
Not in terms of this particular case.
I would be surprised if the entire American economy had changed. They were pumping trillions in there to support families against COVID, and they are saying that it's not increasing.
I'm saying that
inflation.
There are COVID dynamics. I think the 7%.
Well, I'm glad you're saying that COVID. Even the IMF, which is literally run by America, is telling us that COVID has impacted the world economy negatively, and that it is creating rising prices. It cites accommodation, it cites food, it cites fuel prices, and it cites the cost of capital. It says capital is going up, and it cites the fact that it will create confusion in capital flows across the world. This is the World Economic Outlook of the IMF, published in January 2022. So what I'm saying is that the disruption to economies is so broad that we in Ghana, driving a process in Africa, should be looking to reform how our economies are calibrated and improve our competitiveness in the international economy. And therefore, E-Levy, to my mind, is a nationalist call. Where do you get resources to act as a catalyst within this economy so that we can boot competitiveness? effectiveness.
Some have suggested cut your expenditure.
Yes.
Look at how much the expenditure is
The
for the executive. I mean, the add-on year on year.
The pushback.
The millions we've added.
Yes.
They say cut on waste.
Yes.
The Auditor General has told us over 12 billion Ghana cedis has gone into waste. I mean, I could go on and on.
Let me land on that. The pushback.
On this
Can I address the pushback?
Even yes, I'll give you the opportunity, but I just want you to put all of this together. Even the recent flight of the president, some have called it into question. They are looking at the computation from Ghana to France to Guyana and all of that. And the fact that it's costing the Ghanaian taxpayer, in terms of the initial bill, $14,000 an hour, 476,000.
Is that an invoice from the security services?
These are details that, I mean, based
from
on the flight plan and where the route he's
from
going.
The security services.
The security services, mind you, the security services. When we've invited them on the floor of Parliament, what have they had to tell us? They've told us it's a national security issue, and they are not willing to discuss it.
So the pushback is based on government expenditure, waste, and then sources that haven't been exploited fully. Okay, when you talk about government expenditure, you say the expenditure in the executive is increasing. This last year, certain agencies, in fact, 2022, post 2020,
right,
2021, 2020, certain agencies of the government, which were ministries before, have been collapsed and sent into the presidency. They are budgeted for, including the Zongo ministry, which is now coordinated from the presidency. So their budget is there, including the special development initiatives, presidential special development initiatives.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There are these agencies which used to be ministries, monitoring evaluation, which have been located in the presidency. So they are provided for in the budget of the presidency.
Right.
It's not a question of the president's household increasing its expenditure.
But does it still account for the ballooning that we are seeing? I mean, if we are going to cut our coat according to our cloth, you would expect that even with the executive, yes, you have these initiatives, but we'll cut down on spending.
This year, the executive said it is cutting down 20% of projected expenditure. It has stated that it is cutting down 20% of projected expenditure. Then when it comes to the waste, it is also actively dealing with the waste. What is the waste? Leakages due to human contact, where money is exchanged hands. What is supposed to go to the state doesn't go, particularly at ports and in the...
But I thought we had rectified all of that with the icons and everything.
Yes, but it's not. We are not completely there yet. Paperless has shot up our revenues extremely. ICOMS is there, but there are still... little things, and then on the other side, we are trying to eliminate the Goro things. You know, you can renew renew your NHIA online. You can apply for your passport online and all that. So digitization is advancing the fight against leakages. That's what I want to establish. That leakages, yes, but digitization is also expanding the frontier against that. So we will be conserving over time, but it's over time.
Okay.
Then you have the unexploited, where people talk about property taxes and all that. We need to revamp and implement a property tax. I think that will be acceptable to as many as possible and will bring in income. And the government has started that by doing this.
I was just about to point that. And even Pierre Laporte of the World Bank pointed same out to you, that you could use that avenue.
Yes, we've done the identification part of it. We've identified the properties nationwide. And now we are going to build a uniform database, which will do the rating and then use digital means to do the collection.
Right.
So that will improve. But again, we are saying that we are at a junction where the E-Levy, to my mind, is a brand new opportunity. You have monies that are brand new, which means you are not stressing old sources of tax. You're not stressing corporate taxes.
But that's exactly what you're doing.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's brand new.
No, that's exactly. You are stressing old, because the same people paying tax are the same people going to be levied, who are conducting these money electronic transactions. It's the same pool.
But that market has grown to a trillion cedi market on the back of government facilitation, government infrastructure. It is important that government takes an interest in it.
Why don't you? Yes, you've created the infrastructure, and I was even listening to the BBC earlier this morning talking about Airbnb across the world and an entity in Africa that is trying to replicate that for the African continent. What are they going to run on? Mobile money transactions. Yes. If you facilitate it and you bring in something like an e-levy, you are basically going to cripple the same industry that you... And we have example. We have example here, Buaben Asamoa. We have example in different countries, from Uganda to Cameroon and all of that. Some even implementing at 0.2% with the pushback so huge that they had to back down. So with a 1.75 now being suggested to a 1.5, yes. I mean...
That is why I'm saying that Ghana has a unique opportunity to influence the African economy by accepting this within the Ghanaian economy, because it has potential to change a lot of things.
Okay, it has potential. Yes. Just clarify this for me. I asked you initially. Would you, if you were to trade places, the NDC is in power and you are in opposition right now with the numbers you have, and they brought in an e-levy on the back of COVID, would you have supported it?
It's far-fetched. I'm not in that position, but I am in a position where I believe the government has brought a far-sighted measure that ought to be supported. I believe very strongly that the government is being courageous about the way forward. I believe that the government is pulling out all the stops in order to get Ghanaians onto a path that is more sustainable and can lead us to more competitive positions in the international market.
You spoke about
going the traditional way.
You spoke about the 20% cut in expenditure.
Yes.
Till today, we don't have any framework. We don't have any, I mean, the budget statement, unless we're going for the mid-year budget review or something, we don't have anything as of now that points to the fact that we've had 20% slashed in this sector or that sector and this and that. It's rhetoric. We don't have it anymore.
No, it's not rhetoric. It will be implemented administratively.
Will be implemented?
Yes, administratively. But the finance minister has stated it clearly that it simply means matching revenues to expenditures up to 80%.
Okay.
That they are not going to pay beyond that. So it's going to be implemented administratively. But he's giving that broad understanding.
So if there were a designation for about 5 billion for this entity, it means that you can go up to 4 billion and nothing further than that. That's what you're saying.
That's what it means.
But how are we going then to be able to fact check and follow these? Because in some instances, we know that when it comes to the ministries, and this is where I'm asking it from, when it comes to the ministries, there's push and shove, and this has been allocated, but sometimes you overspend, you do this, you do that. So in the end, aren't we going to end up in the same place?
So it will be interesting and brilliant for the media to go beyond and also establish mechanisms for fact-checking with government agencies and institutions. Nothing stops you from that.
It's not the easiest thing getting information from them, even with the right to information.
It's also not the best that sometimes it's rumor that drives the process. You know, as early as the Champon days, we use rumor to fish for real information. That once a rumor is put out, then the relevant government agency is compelled to come and respond to the rumor and put out the facts. We can be more proactive. The finance ministry is asking us to do something novel.
Right.
The finance ministry is saying that we in Ghana can implement something that appears not to have been well received in other African countries. The finance minister is saying that if we succeed, we can boot our economic recovery process with funds that are not loans, that are not burdened by interest payments, that are raised from within the country, and that can be ring-fenced and directed, targeted at specific interventions, which will act as a catalyst in our economy. All these positives are there. So the finance ministry also ought to have a responsibility to be accountable.
Why on the spectrum, when it comes to accountability, that's a whole different ballgame, because a lot of people, in fact, there's a recent survey that points over the years that point to the fact that I think it's the Afrobarometer, the CDD, that put it together. Since 2013 or so, Ghanaians are willing to pay taxes or levies or whatever.
Yes.
Up to about 80%, close to 90%, it's been fluctuating. I think the last one was around 73%. The problem has to do with accountability, how you use our taxes. And I think Gabia Otredako in recent times tweeted as well on that. That has been the fulcrum of the conversation. But let me find out, why are we not charging the telcos instead? Why create an extra burden when I am transacting with mobile money? And we're all rational beings. When it comes to money matters, we are rational, very rational. Why is it that some people buy products emanating from China and the rest because of their pricing over products that are made here in Ghana? Patriotic, yes, but these are rational financial decisions that have to be made. Why are we not charging the telcos that are getting so much. MTN also is willing, because the others are not even charging anything. MTN is willing to come down to 0.75%, which I've not seen being implemented then, from 1%. Why not charge them instead of adding on to the ordinary user?
That first question, the best answer I can give is that's a policy measure.
It's a policy
Government
measure,
policy.
even if the people will feel the pinch.
Government has carefully researched and thought through and decided that at this stage, an e-levy would be important and useful. Before, if you recall, there was an increase in CST, top tax, which had to be brought down.
Customer service tax.
Which had to be brought down, if you recollect, in response to the people. And then you have the service providers who are taking a service charge, a service fee. And then they have said that once the entire measure goes through, they are willing to drop their charge by 0.25%.
Right.
It's part of the larger measure of receiving. You cannot start implementing the 0.25 without the other measure approved by Parliament. So all of that is there, and they are going forward. Then the second part of the question about people accessing the service and dropping off and all that, frankly, before interoperability, some of the financial transactions people had to go through cost more manually than going through this process. Because you can now sit at this desk, go to your bank, make payments for services, donations to family, and transact business abroad through your right here on your phone. You can interact with your wallet, your bank account, your international partners, everything. Now we have PAPs for after. You can have that. Then you can have the situation where I live in Adenta. I set off at 5:30 this morning, and I barely managed to get here by 7:30. And then I go and queue in a bank to take money out, irrespective of the amount. I have to queue for another couple of hours. Then I sit in another means of transport and drive across the capital from the eastern side into the center of Accra to the western side, another couple of hours sitting in traffic to deliver the finance, the resource. And after delivering it, I then get onto another piece of public transport. So getting the intent and executing it may take a whole day just to take money from the bank and go and deliver it.
But that's exactly what some people have suggested you're going to push us to. People will now
that is where we were before.
People will now want to hold cash and make payments once they're paying anything above the threshold of 100.
What I'm trying to do is compare the then existing inconveniences and going back to them as against going forward. Because it will cost you several layers of financing, public transport, to do this trip, a return trip. It will cost you several layers of financing, maybe even more than the amount of money you want to go and give over, because you have no other means of doing it. And then the inconvenience of the hours wasted, and then the possibility of being attacked, robbers and all that. Worst of all, the possibility of being in an accident. You are mobile, moving from one vehicle to another. So you have all the possibilities that could be negative. We don't wish they happen, but we had that marketplace. People complained about pickpockets taking their money when they are trying to get into Trotsky's and all that, and cars getting jammed and injuries here and there.
I mean, it still happens, and people's mobile money accounts are also hacked and all of that. So
part of the money being asked for is to strengthen the platform and improve security. Part of the money is earmarked for that. So the convenience of staying with the service is far higher than the inconvenience of withdrawing from the service because of the e-levy.
There are those who have also said that this is going to hamper, and experts who have also said that this is going to hamper the whole digitizing and digitalizing agenda as well.
Yes.
Both of them put
I've read very powerful
How do you feel
experts.
about it, quickly?
I am enjoying the debate. The very, very erudite tax experts, academics, and speaking to these issues. But there's always a hump. When you are implementing a policy, there's always a hump. There will be those who will be brought in immediately, those who will fall out, and those who will come on board later. Once we go over that hump, I think we should talk ourselves through that hump.
Okay.
Yes, that's what we must do. We accept that there's a hump about waste, about collection, about efficiency and all that. But there's also the benefits in terms of monies that can be earmarked to invest in sectors that will act as a catalyst to the economy. So let's get over that hump and engage.
I don't know whether if this is implemented, how Ghanaians would get over a hump of an e-levy, how they would react to it. Because
the hump is about the engagement. You're saying that there are experts, and I'm saying
I understand. I was also just using another analogy. But to wrap the conversation on the e-levy, first of all, are you hopeful? Do you believe it would actually pass on the floor of Parliament into a law and be implemented? And I mean, without some of the shortfalls that have been forecast, where lots of people are going to get off and not transact as often, and also put into perspective the fact that you don't have the numbers to execute this.
With the ongoing conversations, town hall meetings led by the minister,
where you're spending more of taxpayers' money.
We are investing in getting the E-levy.
If this were popular, you wouldn't have to be doing all that.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's a courageous government that will push something worth it without fear of electoral losses. And that it is a test of the value of the E-levy. That will be 2024.
Okay.
Yes. So we are not doing this to test popularity in terms of electoral votes. We are doing this as a national necessity, a call to national duty. The patriotic call that you said, that using that, we can transform our economy at our own pace, under our own steam. The other options will not transform this economy. The other options do not inject competitiveness. The other options stall and stagnate us, and we go back. So it is not good enough to go back in a post-COVID economy. It won't help us. We have too much experience of that. So this is an opportunity to break through and go forward. So I believe that it will pass. I believe that the consultations ongoing and all that will bring to the fore the core need for this and the value to the Ghanaian economy going forward.
So to wrap on the e-levy, two angles. The Asin North Member of Parliament, Jachi Kwesen, is still coming to Parliament.
Yes.
He's still featuring, and he has every intent of voting if you table the e-levy, as you bring it back with a 1.5% suggestion.